Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling Serenity Sunday. Yes, it's that day of the week that we get to kick back, relax, rejuvenate, refresh, just basically take care of you, which is what I'm doing today. My poor dog is confused because we went out for our walk, we came back, we came inside Sparkles instead of getting into the car. And then I proceeded to take off her harness and her leash and hung it up. And I took my sunglasses off and my regular glasses off and took my shoes off. And she was sort of like, and she's standing there watching me with this puzzled expression on her face, like, what are you doing? We're supposed, and she sort of like looks back at the door again and looks up at me and looks at the door. Like, and I just looked at her and I said, sorry, sweetie, mummy's not feeling well today. Got a headache going on, and the stomach's feeling a little weird, like I've eaten onions. So I'm not sure where the onions could have come from because I'm very particular about the food that comes into the RV. And then I suddenly thought, oh yeah, I had that barbecue stuff. I had that barbecue pulled pork sandwich yesterday with their what was it, a sweet sauce, and maybe there was onions in the sauce. I'm going to pay for it today. So people like Michael's and stores like Michael's text you at the most inopportune times, but that's okay. I don't even know what their special is, but anyway, so yeah, so I was just, stomach's feeling a little queasy. I've just had some yummy lemon, ginger, and honey tea because that usually helps settle the stomach after I've had an interaction with onions. It's helping clear the sinuses, which is causing the sinus pressure across here. Woke up with that at 5 o'clock this morning. Oh, and it was a nauseating headache. It really was. It was just nothing I could do, no position I could be in, no oils, nothing was touching this thing. And I was just like, oh. And I thought, well, maybe if I go back to bed and I lay on my left side, we'll see what happens. And I actually went back to sleep for a couple of hours, so that was good. And woke up with it still there and niggling, but pretty much okay. So we went out for our walk this morning, had a beautiful walk. It's a gorgeous morning out there, very cold wind out there though. It was like 50-something degrees, 52, 53, somewhere around there. But yeah, there's a very cold wind blowing out there. So I have the windows open in the RV. You're probably going, wait, what? Well, inside my RV, it is, because the sun is on the RV, it is around 75 degrees right now inside the RV. I want it cooler, so I opened up the windows rather than putting the AC on. Let nature take its course. The only problem is that with this breeze, it's blowing in dust, which is affecting my sinus, affecting the sinuses with the dust, of course. Okay, now that we've solved that problem, on to the next one. But it's going to be a nice day. I've got a meeting with a client in just under an hour to go over her. I did a recording of her family tree last week, and now she's got some questions. So it's going to be good because I get to talk to her again, get to answer her questions, and take her on a journey through her family instead of just going, well, this one here and this one here and da 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 da. I get to take her on a journey with her ancestors and stuff. And speaking of ancestors and things, so I was trying to figure out this morning, which holiday should I talk about today? And I thought, well, I looked at the date, 19th, and I thought, was that the day we were in Vienna? I think that might have been the day we were in Vienna. I'd have to go back and calculate. But I think it was the day that we were in Vienna 10 years ago. And Vienna was amazing. It was my first time off the boat since I got that 24-hour stomach flu. And they put us on the buses and took us on a bus tour down to downtown Vienna. And I remember we drove past this huge apartment, and they said, well, that's an apartment building. We're like, what on? And she said, oh, you're probably noticing the really large building on the left-hand side. And we're looking out the window. This building was massive. It seemed to go on and on and on. And it was a massive apartment building that was 1 kilometer long. That's 1,000 meters. And there's about roughly around 3 feet to a meter, roughly. So do the math. It was very long. It was probably no more than 10 stories high. And it was an apartment building. And I'm looking out the window at this thing going, and I look at Brad and I go, Can you imagine trying to navigate just that apartment building? Oh my gosh. And so we got down to downtown Vienna. They took us off the bus. We had our little earpieces on with our little boxes so that we could hear the tour guide as we're walking around. And we had a fantastic walk around Vienna. It was awesome. It was amazing. The cathedrals were gorgeous. It was in Vienna that I got to have the soccer talk, which is this really yummy chocolate tart thing. It's just so good. It's like the white chocolate apple strudel that we had in Budapest. I can still taste it. It was so good. Haven't tasted anything like it since. And we got to see where the actually we're walking down this road there, and there's all of these carriages sitting there, all with horses hooked up, and it's for people to take a ride around the city in a horse-drawn cart. And Brad and I kind of started doing that a little bit, but we didn't have time to do that because we're part of the tour. And we're going along, and I got some great pictures of the horses and carriages all lined up. And got this really great picture of the cab driver of one of them, and he's like leaning back, arms like this, and he's asleep. He was out to it. But I thought, he's like fourth in line. It's not a problem. He probably got it tuned up, and he knows when the horse in front of him moves, and the carriage in front of him moves. It's not a problem. Got to see the those horses. They've got this big horse riding school there in Austria, in Vienna. I can't think of the name of the horses. I think they're like Spanish horses or something that do all this amazing whatever. So we got to see some of those. We actually got to see them going from the arena across the road to where the stables were, and we actually turned down that street and we watched them taking like the last 4 or 5 horses across the street, and then we watched them close the gate. But then you could go to the gate and you could actually look over into the stable area, and it was like this big circular thing that had all the stable doors, and some of the horses had their heads poked out. Beautiful, gorgeous white horses. They were stunning. But yeah, we got to see those. Where else did we go in Vienna? It was cathedral. They just walked us all over the town. Then they put us in a bus and took us back to the boat. And we had booked the extra tour to do Schönbrunn Palace that evening. And so they took it. So we had like about 3 or 4 hours on the boat. We got dinner, had dinner. I think we're leaving. No, we got back for dinner. So it was an afternoon one. So we got back. I think we had like a couple of hours on the bus before, on the boat before we had to go back. And they took us to this palace. Man, that thing is massive. It was stunning. And even though it was winter, all the gardens had literally like died off. And you're seeing all these bare trees and shrubs with no leaves on them. They look like dead sticks stuck together. But using your imagination, you could imagine them in the summertime when they're in full bloom and all the leaves are everywhere and the flowers are out. And oh my gosh, those guys. And we were coming in through the main gates and down the drive, and we walked down the driveway. Didn't drive us because the buses weren't allowed on there. Went into the courtyard area, and they had a Christmas market there that wasn't open at the time. It didn't open till later in the afternoon. And our tour guide took us, she says, follow me, stay close. And we followed her to the store. She says, wait right here. I just need to go in and check in. And so she took us in and checked in. She was also our guide throughout the palace. So we didn't have to wait for one of the palace guides to come and take us. And she took us up these massive staircases, these wide, high staircases into these, I tell you, we walked some miles in that palace. I would have loved to have, and it was that trip. I was like, I wish I had a pedometer with me, because I would love to have known how many miles we walked in that palace. But we were taken up to a certain floor level, and then we were taken through the rooms in there, and then she took us down to the next floor level, and we were taken through the rooms there. So she had a set path and all that. But this palace has been around for centuries. It is amazing. These rooms were huge rooms, and you're talking tall ceilings. If you ever watch programs like Pride and Prejudice or oh god, now they all escape my head, where they have those big grand rooms with the very, very tall ceilings, that's what these rooms were like. And there were tapestries and paintings that took up these spaces. Like one tapestry was a tapestry or painting. One of them was like 60 feet tall. I'm like, okay. No, sorry, 60 feet wide and 30 feet tall. 30 feet tall, 60 feet wide. So this was it was on one wall, 60 foot long, 30 feet high. And I'm just standing there looking at this thing going, can you imagine how long it took them to paint that? Wonder how long they had to sit to get that painted. And these things go through your head, and then there's all these tapestries, and you can only get so close, but you were close enough to see these little tiny stitches. And like, I do cross stitch, and I'm looking at these things going, that would have taken years to do. Even if you're doing it, 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day or whatever their work hours were during that time, it would still take you years to have accomplished. And did you have one person working on it or two people working? How many people were working on these things? But they were massive tapestries. They were beautiful and very well preserved as well. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes down here to make sure I remember everything. But this palace was it was breathtaking. And at one point we got to look out over the gardens at the back, which of course all winterized, but we did get to see paintings and pictures of what the gardens look like in the summertime, and they were stunning. And I was like, man, these paintings and photographs were taking my breath away. I'm like, can you imagine just walking through those gardens at that time of the year? So I said to Brad, we're going to come back during the summertime. He's like, why? I said, I want to see the gardens. But one of the families that she talked about the most, because there's been a lot of families that have lived in that palace over the years, but one of the families she talked about the most was Maria Theresa. And Maria Theresa was kind of known as the mother of Austria. And she is the only woman to have held the position as the ruler of Habsburg dominions from 1740 until she died in 1780. And you're thinking, why would this person be? Well, I tell you, I have read some of her history, just small pieces of it, and the stories we got to hear. Well, I got fascinated in the stories of the fact that she was the only woman ever to hold that position for 40 years in the 1700s. And I thought, wow, this is a woman I need to know more about, because to be the only woman to have this sort of power, and hearing some of the stories of what she had done over the years during her reign, she was definitely a woman ahead of her time. And she was a woman that was, if I want this, you're going to make it happen. If I tell you I want this, make it happen. She was no holds barred. She got married to Francis Stephen, who was... he was the Duke of Lorraine, former Duke of Lorraine, because I think he had to give that one up in some war or something. But she got married to him in 1736. He died at the age of, what was he, 56 when he died? Yeah, he died before her, because he went, and she was, when did he die? She was 1780. He was a few years before that. But over a 20-year period, they had 16 children. Now, my little genealogy brain was going, Mum and Dad, 16 kids. Just thinking of the wall space that would be needed to put Mum and Dad there and lift out 16 kids, their spouses, and then all of their kids. But out of that 16, they had 13 that survived in infancy. Then she had, I think it was 4 or 5 who didn't make it to their teenage years. So that's, was it 3 that didn't make it, then plus another 4 or 5, so that's 8. So she's now got half the kids still alive. Her youngest was the reason I clicked onto this name was because of how well known this name is, but she is the mother of Marie Antoinette. And Marie Antoinette, for those that don't know, was married to Louis XVI of France, and they abolished the royalty in France in 1792. 1792? Yeah, 1790, October of 1792. They then executed Louis XVI in, was it January or February of 1793, and then Marie Antoinette was then tried and convicted and found guilty of high treason in October of 1793, and both of them had their heads chopped off. excuse me. So there was that when, as soon as she said that the youngest daughter was Marie Antoinette, I was like, oh, okay. So she's got all these other kids along here, and the youngest one down here is Marie Antoinette, who got married to Louis XVI. And I was trying to think if they had like 3 or 4 kids, I think. Can't remember, but something like that. So I was going through my little brain there. I mean, it was blowing my brain. This was when she started talking about the genealogy and who Maria Theresa's parents were and who their children were. The only one I linked onto was Marie Antoinette because of that connection with Louis XVI and the fact that both of them were killed by guillotine or executed by guillotine. So it just stuck in my brain that I needed to find out more about this woman. But Maria Theresa, she was well ahead of her time. She promoted commerce within the country, agriculture. She reorganized the Austrian military. And the one that surprised me is that they had a smallpox outbreak in Austria in 1767, I think it was. But the thing that was interesting about that, they had I think it was a smallpox epidemic in 1767 is what I read. I should have checked that before I came on. But she heard that in England there were these doctors who had these inoculations against smallpox. Think about this. This is back in the 1700s. And she wanted the doctors to come over and show her doctors how to, because, well, actually her doctors were against it. So she wanted to bring these 2 guys over to create the inoculation in Austria so that she could have all the children inoculated. And there's a whole thing on this thing about the inoculations that she bought them for the smallpox, on how I think it was orphan babies were given the smallpox inoculation just after birth, or within a few days, weeks or something of birth. And then there were orphan children that they used from like 6 years to 17 years or something that they use this inoculation against. But she had her scientists, these doctors refused to come over from England, so she had her scientists somehow got the inoculation formula or whatever, and she had them improve it. And I'm like, this is back in the 1700s? Wow. But I remember, there was just all these details just getting crammed into my small little head. And I was like, this is so interesting. And then there were some parts of the place that made huge impacts on me, like these beautiful grand rooms that were sitting rooms or bedrooms. But what I liked the most, they says, oh, see over there by the fireplace. Mara looking at the fireplace, and she walks over and she pushes on the wall next to the fireplace, and this door opens. Every room in the palace had one of these doors, these hidden doors. And of course, me, who has always liked mysteries, and moving around old buildings with secret rooms and passages and all of that, I was sort of like, I want to go for a walk through the hallways. But these doors were in place, and this is how the servants moved around the palace, was going through these hidden passages behind all of these grand ballrooms and reading rooms and libraries and bedrooms and things. They all moved around the palace within the walls, and would use these doors to access the rooms. Like they'd go into the bedrooms to light the fires and put the bed warmers into the beds, and the bed warmers were these pans that they would put the hot coals into, and then they would rub them on the sheet and between the sheets on the cold winter nights and things like that. And but this is how they would go into the rooms to get the fires burning, to keep the fires going, to get the water in there for the baths, for the bathing and all that sort of thing. So it was really interesting to hear about that. There's this whole, we're going through these grand hallways and all of that, but there's these secret paths, there's these hallways running behind that we can't see, that the servants were running around in. And then I thought, okay, those are the servants' access. I wonder how many of the royal families that lived in here, like the kids and stuff, that would go running through these hallways to get away from parents or hide from their parents and things, and or for those secret trysts that would take place and all of that. So my brain just started going all over the place about this. And then later on, I actually read a mystery book that was based on a royal family living in the palace and how they used the secret passages for themselves to move around so they wouldn't get seen or something like that. And it was kind of interesting. And so I learned more about I don't know how much of the book was true as far as the layout of the passages and all of that, but just the thought of, yeah, I remember those little doors near the fireplace or over in the corner of the room where the servants would come in and out and do what they needed to do. And there were some parts of the palace that were closed off because they were doing renovations on them at the times. But what they did have, instead of just having up those construction walls that say, pardon our dust and that sort of thing, they had them decorated with the paint. They had them decorated with posters of the paintings that would normally hang in that area. So you still got to see these grand pictures and tapestries and things, but they were photographs of the actual paintings and stuff, and they were blown up to be the size, and they had these little frames around them. It was really cool how they had done that. And then we get towards the end of the tour, and we go into this room. It's massive. I mean, these rooms were huge, but this room was massive, and there were these there was this huge bed. Now, this was not a normal size bed. It was way bigger than you probably could have got 4 king beds onto this thing. It was massive. It was huge. And I'm like, well, you could have a really good orgy on that one if you were that way inclined. It was massive. And when we came to this, and there's all these beautiful drapes hanging behind it, this big elaborate headboard on it, so you knew it was a bed. And it was I can't remember how big they said it was. I want to say it was like 20 feet by 20 feet. It was huge. May have even been bigger. I don't know. I'd have to go research that. But we go into this room, and there's all these chairs lined up along the wall on one side, and all these chairs lined up on the wall on the other side. And she says, "Welcome to the birthing room." And I'm like, look at Brad and said, "Did she say birthing room?" And she must have heard a lot of people murmur, because we're all like, "The birthing room?" And she said, "This is where Maria Theresa had her 16 children." Because she was pregnant for for 20 years of her reign, she was pregnant. And I thought, okay, yep. But why all the chairs? I'm thinking all the chairs. And what would happen is that when she went into labor, she was moved to this bed. Then all these members of nobility, some sort of nobility, head of this, government leaders or whatever, would come and take these chairs, and they would sit around the bed and watch the birth. I'm like, here is the, I think she was an empress, I think was her title, of a country, having to lay there, give birth to her children in front of all of these men. And they were there to witness the fact that it was actually her giving birth to her child. I'm like, well, who else would it be? But they were there to witness the birth of royalty. And they had to have these witnesses in the room. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm just trying to imagine, and somebody said, well, how many people would there be? She says anywhere from 20 to 30 men would be sitting in here watching the birth. And I'm like, and she was the only woman there, she had her maid with her. And I'm like, this poor woman, here she is, the empress of the country, in one of her most vulnerable moments of her life, welcoming in a brand new child into her life, and all these guys are sitting there watching her. I'm like, yeah, I'm so glad I'm not royalty. But that image of that bed has just stuck in my head since then. And all I could think of was all the stuff that we've been told about that this woman had accomplished for her country and how she had improved it. And then having to think of her being in one of her most vulnerable states of giving birth to a child, and she had 16 children. And I'm like, okay, this woman is, I gotta know more about this woman, definitely, because what she managed to accomplish in the 1700s, when women in power in those days, was not heard of. They were not heard of. And so I was sort of like, that's going to be a very interesting woman to read about. And she did an amazing amount. Although when her husband passed away, it was said that she painted her room black. She only lived in black. She cut her hair short. And on the day of the month, I think it was like the 17th, 18th, somewhere around the middle of the month, was the date that he had passed away, in whichever month he had passed away. But on that same day, every month, she would go and close herself into her room. And they said that's what affected her mentality towards the end of her life. And she basically slept in this black room. Everything in the room was black. her clothes were black, and she just basically mourned her husband for the rest of her life. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And now I'm in the same thing. I'm sort of like, yeah, I get it now. I get it. I understand it. So it was just a great, but that's just that was just Vienna, and that was just one of the most amazing places. It was just gorgeous. It was beautiful to drive around. But that palace has stuck with me all these years. 10 years later, I'm still remembering this palace and the time we walked through it. And then when we got to walk outside, it was after 5 p.m. and the Christmas market was open. And they had the small Christmas market and the thing, but they had those guys that walk on stilts, and they were dressed up as clowns, and they were playing with the kids. They had these big balls that they were bouncing down with the kids, and the kids would try and bounce them back up to these guys on the stilts. And the guys on the stilts would all stand in a line with their hands on the shoulder of the one in front of them and put their legs apart, and the kids were running through these tunnels made by these stilts. It was so cool to see the kids running around and really enjoying the vibe in the Christmas market. And they had some stalls, and we had, I think we had to be back on the bus. I think we had 30 minutes before we had to be back on the bus. So it gave us time to look around the store inside, as well as the Christmas market area. And I remember getting the book on the palace. So I like those books that they take and just have brief things that you can go, oh yeah, I remember that now. Da, 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 da. It's just got just enough of a description that you remember. Oh yeah, I remember. Da, 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 da. Which is great, because when I pull those books out, I can start going through them. In fact, I was thinking about it yesterday. Actually, when I woke up at 5 o'clock with my headache, I was trying to get my mind on other things, and I thought, and I'm thinking, okay, to tell my story, I've got all those photographs. What if I sat with a video camera somehow set up around me, trained on the screen, and on the monitor on my computer, all I bring up a photo and go, oh yeah, that photo was taken, da 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 da, and this is the story behind it. Or because I have some of my photos are sorted into albums, so I could start in the album and go, this album is about da 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 da, and then just put the photograph up full screen and talk about that photograph, move on to the next one, do the same thing, and take people on a journey that way. So it's a video. It's a video recording of my voice talking about the photographs that are in the albums and things. So that's another way I can back up. I back up all my digital photos are backed up in 6 different places. So that will give me yet another one. I'm paranoid about losing photographs. I love photographs. They make up great storybooks. That was my favorite thing as a kid. Go to grandparents' place and go and find the album that I like, because I'd lift open the cover and go, oh yeah, this has got the cool story about da 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 da. So I'll take that one out and go, read me a story. Photo albums. The photo albums are incredible, incredible storybooks. If you think about it, it's a book full of pictures that you have taken over your lifetime to remind you of certain things that happened. So what if you sat down with your photo albums or your photos on a screen, and you had a digital camera sitting back here somewhere, although I'm not sure how I'm going to hook it up, but I'll figure it out. Because you want to capture, I may even sit it in front of me here. Since there's going to be my voice on there anyway, and just talk my way through the photographs. Oh yeah, this photograph was taken around here, and da da da, this is what it was about, and that day we did da 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 da. Because photographs are a great way to prompt the memory into different stories and things. So think about that. Think about taking your photographs and sitting with a digital camera, recording your screen or your album as you touch each picture and talk about them and the story behind them. Think about that. So I thought about that last night. This morning at 5 o'clock when I was having the headache and trying to distract myself from the pain. And that's what I came up with. So I'm going to start figuring that out, because I have 60,000 photographs stored, digital photographs stored online, and I've got more, and this is all in one area, and I have a few thousand more that are in another. I've got them spread out all over the place. So I'm going to try and bring them together in one area and have them backed up there, then back up that to a different area. But yeah, I was thinking about doing that video with the photographs. So anyway, I'm out here. I've rabbited on for ages. So yeah, so our day in Vienna was amazing, and that palace was incredible. And the stories that they kept telling about Maria Theresa were just mind-blowing, thinking that, this is 1700s. She came to power in 1740, she died in 1780, and during that 40 years, she may have had such a huge impact on education, on commerce, on agriculture, on the military, on law. She was very much against, she tried to suppress, she was Roman Catholic, and she did suppress the Protestants and the Jewish religions. She allowed the non-Catholics to be allowed to go to college or university. It's like allowed non-Catholics. So she was very much against the Protestant and the Jewish religions and tried to squash them as much as she could. So that was a bad thing about her. But what she did for her country was just incredible. And to think this was in the 1700s and the power that she had and what she was able to accomplish was just mind-blowing. It really was. But anyway, so enough about Maria Teresa. I am out of here. And of course, that was my story on my question of the day. So I suddenly thought, I'm meant to be writing my stories. And I'm like, you talk about them every day. And I'm like, oh, now I have to have somebody to go through all my videos and transcribe them all. Great. But anyway, that's for another day. I go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling Serenity Sunday. Enjoy your day. I'm going to go get ready to talk with my client in about 30 minutes. So enjoy the rest of your day. Kick back, relax, whatever it is you do to relax, rejuvenate, refresh. Go do it today. Remember to take care of you. And we'll catch you guys back here tonight around 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Although, depending on how I feel, we may take a DOG to the PARK. Stay tuned. Hey, Conera.